Hello and welcome back to the channel. LC here, your guide to all things RPG related, and in today's case, our return to the world of triangle strategy. Now you see, when this game originally launched back on the Switch in March, for many of us it was an instant classic, a strategy RPG title that had the stylings to be a true spiritual successor to the one and only Final Fantasy Tactics. Thankfully, this game lived up to the immense amount of hype, and I dare say exceeded most players' expectations. With the title now being released on PC this week, I thought it was an appropriate time to throw together some tips to help some new players enjoy your stay within the land of Norzelia. As someone who sunk in about 170 hours of playtime into this game and beat the title on every difficulty, I put together 10 tips to make your journey much easier if you're a completionist looking to get the golden ending, or if you're just a gamer going through a standard playthrough. These tips will be useful for anyone who ever boots up this title. As a quick footnote, most of the tips that are listed here, I also have comprehensive full-blown videos that break down each subsection in depth back from when the game launched. They will be linked in the description of this video. As usual, also, if you're new here, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss any upcoming videos on triangle strategy and RPG titles. Okay, now let's get started. So starting us off at 10 and 9, we have how to secure the golden route and unlocking characters. I figured let's go ahead and get this one out the way. It's one of the biggies, honestly. So let's start with the golden route, also known as the perfect ending. Yes, it is technically possible to get the golden route on your first playthrough, although I highly advise against it for a few reasons. Mainly because it really lacks a full narrative impact if you haven't gathered the completed roster, and the final battles can actually be extremely difficult if you're on some of the higher difficulties if you don't have a complete roster. You'll come to find that the world and story of triangle strategy is really meant to be savored over repeated playthroughs that showcase the brilliant character growth and the intricacies of the world that they inhabit. But if you actually honestly just want to say screw all that, I do again have a detailed guide that breaks down how to get the golden route. And you could technically do it on your first playthrough, but I think it's a bit of a waste. I would definitely stay before when you have a completed roster. Now, as for recruiting the characters in this game has a pretty versatile cast, and it really caters to most playstyles, with each member of the roster having their own very distinct feel in and out of battle. Unfortunately, it does take a grand total of 4 complete different playthroughs to secure the complete cast, so my recommendation is while you're out there doing your recruiting, switch your game's difficulty down to very easy, to ensure that each run through that you have to do is knocked out in a reasonable amount of time. I was averaging around 5 to 6 hours total for each playthrough, after my second playthrough, so you can get through it pretty quickly, but it is going to be a bit tedious to go through the game every single time. So it's not something I recommend trying to do on normal or hard, but I will definitely say every character in this game is pretty damn fun, so it's worth it to actually go through and try and collect the entire cast. And then sliding in at number 8 and number 7, let's talk about the mechanic that is actually this game's namesake. The almighty Scales of Conviction. This title offers your units the ability to vote on critical moments in the game by way of the following attributes, whether morality, liberty, or utility. Depending on where you stand currently on this scale as actual character Serenoa, this is going to impact your ability to influence and sway the other votes of your squad over to your side. So if you see an option that you really want to pick, it's up to you to try and negotiate with your team to try and get them to vote your way. Now, there's a couple different layers added onto this, and over time throughout the game, it actually becomes just kind of a mini game within itself. You have an exploration phase that you can actually go around and speak to the NPCs within the village or something like that. So any NPCs that you see out there that have an exclamation point over their head, they normally have a critical piece of information that you can use to sway some of the other votes. So go ahead and speak to everybody, even if they don't have necessarily like an icon over their head, they can still have really useful tidbits. And there's also going to be items and stuff like that during the exploration phase that you'll want to pick up. There's some really good items out there that are actually game-changing items, so make sure that you really fully utilize each exploration period that you have. Now, I'm sure there's actually a guide floating around on how to get perfect voting each time on your first playthrough, but if I'm being honest, it's really just worth it to try and sway the votes as much as you can, but really don't lose any sleep over it. By the time you go to New Game Plus, the game will actually show you, where you stand with all of your attributes, and that'll allow you to get the votes more in line. The higher your attributes are, the more you are apt to be able to convince somebody on your squad to vote your way. So don't really stress it. If you're not getting the votes to go your way, I wouldn't even bother resetting or anything like that. Just really wait for your next playthrough, and you can actually look at your attributes, and then you can get the votes to go your way that way, honestly. And then moving on to number 6, it's time to talk about every RPG fan's very favorite thing to do, the almighty farming. Thankfully, in this game, it's relatively straightforward and easy to accumulate vast quantities of coin and crafting materials in a relatively short span of time, and that's going to be by way of abusing the mock battles that can be done at your encampment at pretty much any time once you unlock them. I have a few guides broken down on how to really just kind of go crazy with it, honestly. You can get like 20 coin within a few matches, if not a match, after a while. I found that through my testing and hours of testing, I ultimately found that it's more economic to just get the coin as opposed to trying to farm for specific resources. You'll see in the mock battles that they'll reward you with like certain specific resources, but they end up taking so long, even on very easy and stuff like that, it's just not worth your time. It's worth it to just get the coin and buy the resources, so keep that in mind as well. So I would say once you have acquired the Fat Man, Lionel, you're pretty much good to go. Feel free to farm to your heart's content because you need a lot of gold in this game in order to max. If you're a completionist, you want to max everything out, you need a lot of gold. So you're going to spend a lot of time doing a lot of mock battles and farming and stuff like that, but it does get pretty straightforward after a while, honestly. And then slotting in at number 5, let's talk about some actual in-game battle tactics. Now, while this game shares a lot of its DNA with some of the older Square Enix strategy titles, it differs drastically in a few key areas that we're going to talk about now. To start with, thank God you can actually move after performing an action. This is an actual lifesaver, being able to attack and then retreat. That's really, really good. They do also have directional inputs after ending your turn, so you want to make sure that your back is always turned to the enemy at all times. If an enemy gets a back attack off on you in this game, especially at some of the higher end difficulties, you might actually get one shot. It does a ton of damage and it's an automatic critical attack. A couple other key bullet points when it comes to battle. Make sure that you definitely try and abuse elemental weaknesses as much as you can. Some characters are typically going to be either weak to either fire or ice. By using this element on them, you can score some additional free damage points. Abuse this as much as you can. Within some of the early games, quite abusable, and it can definitely help turn the tide in many difficult encounters, and also altering the stage terrain is an absolute must in some of the higher difficulties. In particular, having ice on the field is super clutch during battle, and when using certain characters like Quarantine and Giovanna, it is just a lifesaver and can really upend some matchups. Also, pincer attacks are absolutely godlike in this game. Anytime you have 2 physical attackers on either side of the opponent, it will trigger a pincer attack, so the first person will attack and then the guy behind him will also attack. It essentially allows you to do double damage for each attack sequence. Use it, it's really good. As a final footnote, when it comes to the TP system, which is essentially like the magic system in Triangle Strategy, be careful that you don't overextend your character and leave them with 0 TP, unless you're actually going all in to KO a character. In most cases, it's not worth it to leave some of your mages or some of your front line without 0 TP because they essentially don't have any options. They won't be able to do anything of meaning outside of attacking for like 2 or 3 turns, and you never really want to be in that situation, so keep that in mind. And then in closing, the elemental stones are actually pretty broken. Shout out to Ice Coffee Gaming. He actually is the one that opened my eyes to that. It's when properly utilized by characters like Anna or Piccoletta, they can absolutely shred some of those heavily armored opponents late game. If you're having issues and you don't really like using mages that much, and you have a lot of those really heavy tank based characters, use elemental stones are really, really good. And then coming in at number 4 and number 3, let's talk about some weapon and unit promotions. So the way this system is set up in Triangle Strategy, you have 3 tiers for both weapon and unit upgrades respectively. So let's talk about the unit promotion first. Most of the core roster that you'll inherit at the beginning part of the game will require 2 full promotions to reach your 3rd and final tier. Thankfully, additional characters that you recruit over time will come in at tier 2, so you only have to promote them once to reach their maximum potential, thank God. The unit promotions come with a variety of benefits, including additional TP slots to use during battle, and additional abilities to add to your arsenal. And you'll start seeing, some of those abilities that you start getting in tier 2 and tier 3 really change the entire utility of characters, so keep that in mind. And then moving on to weapon promotions, these are handled a bit differently and arguably more important than unit promotions. I've created a full guide on what skills and abilities give you the most ROI for your time, and the ones that should be prioritized to be unlocked first, as well as importance when it comes to upgrading characters. And again, between unit and weapon upgrades, these will radically upend how you use certain characters and their utility on the battlefield, so please make sure that that's a priority and you're investing in characters that are going to be able to, that you plan on using for some time. And then coming in at number 2, we have character synergy. Now this is definitely a bit of a sleeper topic when it comes to Triangle Strategy, but when fully optimized, the game can kind of play itself on any difficulty, except for maybe New Game Plus hard mode. That is just kind of like batshit crazy, honestly. You want to look for certain characters that have passive and direct abilities that complement each other and their playstyles. For example, Giovanna and Quarantine are definitely one of the biggest highlights when it comes to that. They both greatly benefit from having ice on the field each turn, which allows Quarantine to do TP on ice, which gives some TP regeneration, and Giovanna, which also allows her to perform Jelly Barrage on a very consistent basis. Keep this in mind as well for defensive playstyles as well, for things like Frederica's Flame Shield being paired with Eridor, which is really strong. He actually becomes a proper menace with that. Feel free to explore and let me know what you found down in the comments, but this is something that I think is kind of not as discussed as regularly, but some of the synergies out there are very palpable. And to cap us all off, we have New Game Plus. It's my absolute pleasure to say that Triangle Strategy has a very robust and entertaining endgame, unlike another recent Square Enix release that will remain absolutely nameless. You get to keep all the equipment, upgrades, and unlock characters in your subsequent playthrough. However, you will immediately notice a sharp uptick in difficulty in the game, and in hard difficulty, the game becomes straight up unfair at times. Literally, the first battle on hard mode is insane in New Game Plus. That aside, this is where you'll likely do most of your grinding and unlocks for characters, so as I suggested earlier, don't sweat it if you miss out on a vote or a character route. It's much easier to handle those things past your first playthrough. And that'll do it for 10 quick tips that I have for new players getting into Triangle Strategy. As usual, if you like the content here, make sure you like, comment, subscribe. Let me know what you'd like to see next on the channel, and welcome our PC brethren.